You know, it takes a very special kind of person, and a person that I admire a lot, to willingly get on their knees, lie to people, and pucker their swollen lips at the rectum of Bandai Namco, and not only open their mouths for all the fecal matter possible to slide down their gullets, but to force, with their own volition, every piece of it down that they can, like it's their last meal alive. And with that little tidbit, I've been sitting on this review for maybe 2 days now. I always mean to do it, but it's really hard to actually review and talk about a game and try to give it some sort of praise when most of what you have to say is rather negative and you don't like the game itself. And of course, if you like this game, it's all good. If you like any game, it's alright as well. But I did not. And I'm here to tell you why and to help you save your money. Because it's another year and it's another example of how Bandai Namco should just stop making 3D anime fighting games. Because they used to make better games back then when it came to 3D anime fighters, but they've really lost their touch. One's Justice 2 was about as good as it got, and that game came out 6 years ago, so I've waited for this one for quite a long time. And I suppose I was expecting it, but have it come out, and when you already had all the homework done, and you completely missed it? Because mind you, there's so many assets, animations, and just about everything copied from the previous game, and yet they felt the need to strip away a lot more of it, to where this game just feels incredibly hollow. Unfortunately, everything in All's Justice by comparison to One's Justice 2 feels cut, lazy, and cheap. There are some faint remnants of fun to be had in this game. Maybe you can find some fun in the online in particular, since I had a little bit of fun with the online, but I know it'll be dead within a few weeks. See, if you're a fan of My Hero Academia, I can see you enjoying this a lot, whereas me, I have a very complicated relationship with this sort of franchise. At the beginning, I really enjoyed it, and it kind of ruled my life just for a little period of time. But then after a while, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm starting to see the writing on the wall here, and it kind of stinks like shit. And I didn't think the games would go that way, but well, inevitably they have. And the more I sat on writing this review, the more I just got depressed. I come home from work, I'm already super tired. I've got other work I'm doing with walkthroughs and challenge runs and stuff, and I'm having a lot of fun. But then I look at this thing, and this is really getting in the way, and I know it takes ages to edit. So even a game that's not good, like this, the fact that it wastes my time when I really need to inform people about this, I need to get it reviewed, and I need to explain why, well, it becomes quite grating. So as far as the gameplay is concerned, well, it's a fighting game, but not only do 3D fighters not have all that much to them compared to 2D fighters, I think it would be easier to talk about what the gameplay doesn't do. Firstly, I do like that there's seemingly some additional mechanics to build off from the last game. They added things like a second dodge, so that way you can kind of get out of the way, and if you need to make a correction, or in the air you need to close that distance between you and your opponent, you can do that. But the problem is, it also kind of nerfs your actual sprint speed or your dash speed, so you feel slower and more sluggish than you did in other games too. So you still got the unblockable attack as well, that produces a red aura around you indicating a block break attack, and it can shatter enemy defenses. It seems a lot more responsive than it usually is, so that's good at least. And with a bit more of a subtle change, the use of the quirks compared to the last game don't really give you hyper armor anymore. If you were aware, when you used a quirk in One's Justice 2, it gave you a sort of hyper armor that allowed you to push through the enemy's attack unless they were using a quirk as well, or they were using an unbreakable attack. So it makes the quirks themselves a lot riskier to use instead of being able to spam them. And that's good, but there is a catch as well. See, if you block and you attack with your first quirk, or triangle if you're on PlayStation, or Y if you're on Xbox, and it creates a yellow aura around your quirk when you attack, and it switches up the animations a little bit, and that's what gives you hyper armor. So it's the one thing you can do with your quirk that gives you hyper armor. And while it's not super reliable for landing hits, what it does do is when you land an attack against an opponent who also uses their quirk and you get the first hit, Or if you do it just as they're landing some basic attacks, you can do a massive counter attack which does quite a bit of damage. But while this is still a good thing, when it comes to all the other game modes that aren't online, you've got the AI that can somehow execute counters perfectly. And because it's a very simple game and you don't have that many buttons to push to attack, or it's pretty straightforward what you have to do, it seems that the enemies have more HP and even super armor across all the game modes. So you're encouraged to attack more often to try and get combos going, but when your enemy AI can pick up perfectly on what to do and counter back, what else do you have to do but sit from a distance and do your best to spam ranged quirk attacks? Because that's how I got through most of my fights on the story mode or in the team up missions. There's just no other way to go about it. I think I should probably talk about the quirks as well and mention something that's pretty aggravating, because in 1 Justice 2 you had your quirks that were set to 2 buttons, your quirk 1 and quirk 2. But see, you could just stay stationary and push those quirk buttons and they would use your quirk. But if you moved in a certain direction, it would trigger a different type of attack with that quirk. So you could flick the stick forward and push triangle, or move to the left to push triangle, and they all did different moves. Some were more defensive, some were more aggressive. Whereas in this game, it dulls that down so that it's just you're stationary and using your quirk, or you're moving in any direction and using your quirk. So you've essentially gone from what amounted to 10 variations, and now you've only got 4 variations. Now, the reason why this could be is because they've got more characters in the game. They did cut a few out, and none of the DLC characters from the previous game have made appearances in this game, or some of them have, but most of them did not. And while there are technically more characters on the roster, I think each character has gotten more shallow. Even characters that have been in the previous 2 games since the very beginning, almost 10 years now, well, some of their abilities and combos and quirks have been taken away or massively overhauled, and they don't do what they used to anymore. It just seems kind of lazy to me. And so yes, quirks can still be used to extend your combos by a small amount for some extra damage. When it comes to all the other game modes, because enemies have more inflated HPs, your plus ultra attacks and your quirk attacks do almost no damage at all, and almost makes you wonder why you bother. So you end up stuck in a loop where you're just attacking the enemies over and over again with the same attack for dozens of times over, and fights that should only go for about a minute and a half like it would for any other fighting game, you've got fights that go on for like 4 or 5 minutes, and it's just ridiculous. And while it is a shame that plus ultras aren't as powerful in the regular modes as they are, they're not so bad in the online, but there is definitely a bit of a nerf to them. They don't feel as strong anymore, and now or less you've got 3 different bars, and each one of them is a different plus ultra attack. You can combo with your assist partners to get them to use their plus ultra, but if you have 3 bars, you can't get rid of it all at once to do one massive attack, or you can't get rid of all 3 of them to do a team attack, like a team plus ultra attack, like a special one that they could do. That's all gone, and that's a real shame, because they were really cinematic, they were really cool, and they did tons of damage, and you felt like a superhero, or a supervillain. But now that's all gone, and it just feels kind of empty and kind of lame. And I'll have a little bit more to say about this when it comes to the other modes in the game, especially when it comes to the gameplay, because the team up missions mode is more of an open world exploration type of deal, but it doesn't really feel like an open world. It feels more like a very small sandbox. You know, like a few different city streets inside of a utopia just kind of thrown together, but you can't go beyond them if, you know, it's all blocked off. It is supposed to be a simulation, a way to train the heroes, but I can't help but feel like there was a massive missed opportunity here for them to create an actual, like, open world city that you could run around in and respond to hero calls and fight in the city itself. I mean, wouldn't that be kind of sick? I mean, I think so. Now, when it comes to the character's assist system, in 1 Justice 2, you can hit a button, call in your assist partner for special circumstances. They can jump in to knock an enemy away if you were getting comboed. They could help extend your combo by a couple of hits or giving you a bit of a backup with their quirk. That could be annoying in that game, seeing as how a lot of people relied on their assist partners to bail them out of a combo, and it charged up pretty quickly a lot of the time. So it's just really annoying to deal with, whereas in this, the assist partners are a lot more fair, I would say. They can't knock the enemy away or break them away from a combo, which I can kind of see in that be a good thing, but you would have to nerf how often you use your assist partners, and in this game they do that. You don't use your assist partners as much as you would have in the previous game, but that would have been a good chance for them to still interrupt an enemy's combo, but they don't do that. So in this game, they limit your combo potential exponentially in favour of not allowing your partners to save you or allowing them to do much of a combo extender, because you can call them in and then you can get a couple of hits before you call in someone else. And I suppose the higher your plus ultra or higher your rising meter is affects how fast those assist partners have a cooldown. I'm pretty sure that's how it works, but I didn't quite get around to testing that myself. And I suppose just to summarize the rest of the gameplay, some of the characters feel rather underpowered or unbalanced, and that pertains to what I mentioned before about the quirks, because some characters have quirks with high combo and juggling potential and higher damage output, but with others they're more defensive, so you can't really do all that much damage, and so they're more, for retreating or for blocking. And sure, that's fine, I guess, if you can make that work, but when it comes to the other game modes that rely on single player stuff, that's not the best thing to use, because the enemies have such high HP and their AI is actually pretty deceptively smart. So it kind of stabs you in the back a little bit by, crippling you by giving you heroes or villains that don't have very high damage output and are kind of weak and slow. And I definitely noticed that in some of the later stages of the story where they kind of paired you up with useless characters. So I mentioned it once before, but I'll just bring up the rising mechanic before I move on to the story mode. So when you deal enough damage or you take enough damage, you unlock a rising gauge, and it enhances the powers of your quirks. And I think it does a little bit more damage for your regular attacks, but your quirks get more of a buff. They have different outputs, different animations, and they do a little bit more damage, yes, but they also come out a bit differently as well. I think the best example to use, and one of my favourite, is probably Bakugo, because his first quirk is basically just a close range, like shotgun blast with his gauntlets just setting off explosions right in front of him, and his other one is where he creates sort of like a line of explosives in front of him, and they pop up like a volcano almost. Now, when you use his rising gauge, every attack that you do with that adds these sort of missile attacks to his quirks. So he's got these missile launchers that sprout from his back, and when you use the close range attacks of his quirk, he fires out these missiles that kind of spray everywhere in front of him, and then when you do the single line on the ground, it sets out a bunch of missiles that sort of lock on to the enemy and follow them. He's definitely got my favourite rising gauge to use against the enemies and against other players, and he's super fun to use in this game, if a little bit tricky with his basic attacks, but that's more or less what the rising gauge does. It gives you more damage, your quirks are stronger, and your quirks have different bonus effects. So the story mode takes place from Season 6 of the My Hero Academia anime up until the end of the story in Season 8. I can't really judge the story itself too harshly, as it's more or less something to discuss concerning the anime and the manga, because other than the presentation, everything is ripped straight from there. There are a mixture of cutscenes and still images that don't sit still for too long and have these awkward transitions. It feels like they're trying to show a fight scene using static images, and it just looks hilariously bad. Voice acting is top-notch, even if the dialogue annoys the fuck out of me, especially with the constant feel-good and hopeful talk. I don't like the English dub of this show, and I don't like the English dub of this game in particular. It's more or less pulled from the same place. The Japanese voice acting is still fantastic though. So sure, I'm one for being positive, but when you're bombarded by all this talk about positivity and all that, and a lot of the words start to ring hollow and they lose their meaning because you're always hearing it. If you hear some pretty grim stuff and you finally hear a bout of positivity somewhere here and there, it makes you feel good. But when you're always hearing it, it just kind of gets on my nerves. Maybe I'm just getting old. I'm sure the kids will like that stuff, but me in particular, I'm just sick of it. I did notice out of the 30 to 40 fights in the story that you do, some of them felt missing, because in the show they had all these different fights going on that maybe would have been a bit more unconventional or involved characters that weren't in the roster, and I feel like it was a big missed opportunity not to have them. Like for example, Miss Midnight is not in this game, and when you've got the fight against Giganta Machina, I think his name is, I wish that was a fight in this game. Like it could have been just a big boss and you're like running around the side of him, trying to take him down, switching between the heroes, taking them out. It would kind of break the formula of what this game uses, but I think every once in a while something like that would have been really good to do. It kind of reminds me of that One's Justice 2 fight where you take control of Deku when he's using One for All at 100% and he's flying through the air, and you've got to fight Overhaul when he's in his final form as well. And I think the reason why they cut out some of those fights is because they either put them in the team up missions mode, which I didn't do very much of, and there is a reason for that, I'll get around to that. But I also think that they have a chance to sell back some of those other characters in the season pass, because Star and Stripes is the first one that's going to come out soon, and I think it's incredibly scummy because her fight wasn't in the story mode. So you might think the story already sounds rather tedious with how I'm describing it and that many fights, and trust me, it's way worse than you think. I understand the context behind having the environments look the way they do. You know, there's big battles going on, everything's been destroyed, you know, entire grounds and cities uplifted, but half the damn arenas and stages in the game just look like destroyed rocky backgrounds. Not only do you not have that many maps in the game, especially compared to the other games, but they just look so boring and samey, and some of the layouts are super strange, like you get clipped on the environment or you get stuck in tiny little alcoves, and it's so lame looking. And when it comes to the story mode, again, I understand this, you know, context and all, but for about half the time, the only person you're ever fighting is either All For One or Shigaraki, and multiple versions of both of those characters. There's like 4 or 5 different variants for both those characters, and you're fighting them either once or twice throughout the story. I think the only other person that would have come close is probably Toga, where you could fight her like 6 or 7 times, but yeah, it's still really bad when it comes to Shigaraki and All For One. The timeline and the structure of the story and how it's presented is also a little confusing from the menu, because when you unlock these story missions and you beat them, you can't really work with it, because the idea is that you can start off by picking from a few different fights or branches that you can follow along with the story, and then at some point it all starts to kind of come together in the middle, and then you have to only follow that path. So while there is a bit of variety in when you can choose to engage in these story missions, I feel like for the sake of brevity and breaking up the different sort of tones of the fights and the different pacing of the fights, I think it would have been best if there was just like a list or a straight line of fights that you take on, instead of having this really weird sort of tree, branch, like diagram looking thing. It just felt really awkward to navigate. So there's a few more things to mention about the story in particular, and that's the ranks, the ending, and the tweaks to the nature of the game. So as far as this game is concerned, I've got a lot of problems, as I've already said, but here's where I first noticed it. The enemies in all the game modes seem to be much more intelligent in their approach to combat. They run away, keep their distance, and attack after dodging or countering. I thought this was a major step up, because admittedly, as much as I like One's Justice 2, a lot of the combat is rather brain dead, and the only real challenge comes from the mission mode, where they deliberately have improved AI and modifiers that make them stronger, but that's basically that, but for every other fight and every other type of mission and mode in this game. Because not only do they run away, not only do they attack from a range if they can, or they wait for you to make the first move and counter you perfectly, pretty much all the time if you try to combo them even a little bit, but they all have super armor. So if you don't know what super armor actually is, super armor is when you can attack them, but then they can decide to let down their guard and attack you, but you can't ever break their posture. They can power through all of your attacks to hit you, and the only exception to this is if you get their super armor low enough and you break it, because even using the unbreakable attack doesn't destroy their super armor, and that is insane to me. What makes this even worse is the fact that every enemy has seemingly inflated HP compared to just the regular battles or the online battles. Every enemy you fight has so much more HP than you, their timing on counters is near perfect, they've got super armor, and at the same time, they can wear you down super quickly and annihilate you. It's not uncommon of me to have gone through the story, engaging in a fight for about 3, maybe even 4 or 5 minutes, and that whole time I'm kicking their ass, and they're down to their last sliver of health, and they start getting even more defensive and pulling out more cheap shots with their plus ultra attacks, trying to catch me off guard. And then I go from having full health, never taken any point of damage, and then suddenly I'm almost dead when they're almost dead. It just seems as if the enemy's AI keeps on ramping up the closer it gets to death, and it just seems very artificial. The difficulty feels very artificial. And if the enemies are going to keep their greater intelligence and they keep their distance with quirk spams, then I think it should be fair that you lower their HP. And if the enemies are going to be incredibly aggressive, or if they're going to be rather brain dead, just charging you and never giving up, but never adapting to whatever strategies you throw at them, you should probably give them more HP. Okay, so this next part is more or less something of a story within the story. See, on my alternate channel called Snarist, where I make walkthroughs, guides and challenge runs on games I've already played before, I really intended on having this game appear on there, and I was going to do it as a story walkthrough, because I noticed that the story mode was actually kind of tough, and by the time I started making this review, only about 15% of people on Steam, at least, had beaten the story mode. I thought that was pretty low. So I decided I wanted to make the guide, and I went back through the story and beat all of the fights, and then I got to the last fight in the game. And this is part of the reason why I decided to give up on making that guide, because I didn't know how long it would take me to actually win that final battle. I didn't know what I would do if I kept on failing, and I already felt like I'd wasted enough of my time. So for context, the final battle is between the final form of All for One inhabiting Shigaraki's body, and then you have to play as all the students in Class 1A, either in pairs or as a team of 3. Sometimes you'll include characters like Endeavor or Present Mike, but as far as adults go, they're the only exceptions. Everyone else is a student from Class 1A. And each time that you play as a group of these characters, you need to bring All for One's health down to 0. And even though his HP isn't inflated, he still has super armor, and you've got to move on to the next phase where you get to use new students, and you carry on your rising meter and plus ultra, so you've got to carefully manage your resources there, so you can use it when you really need to. And so the further on you go into these phases, so the further on and through these phases you get, he gets access to a new ability or new variations of his already existing attacks. And that's the tricky part, because there's about 7 or 8 phases where you control different students before you get to fight him one-on-one with Deku. But in the final phase, he likes to spam projectiles. Your guard can only take so much. You can only jump up high so much before you get sniped out of the air with another projectile. So, in this final phase as well, he has these sort of weird cable tentacle things growing out from his legs, so he's hovering above the air, so you need to jump up to him in order to hit his face. But that's a little tricky when as soon as you do that, he creates these giant sort of claws and swipes them, and if you're not blocking in time, which if you attack more than twice, well, you're screwed, and so he'll swipe you and knock you away, and you fall back so far, and you have to get back to him, and he's still spamming more of those projectiles. So your jumping is so slow, your animations are so slow, and your recovery from an attack, it's so pathetic. You have to really commit to your attacks and know exactly what you're doing, because the enemy can just decide when it wants to fuck you, and you can't do anything about it. So you're completely at the mercy of an AI that can kill you so fast, but you have to take forever to kill them, and it's just not fair. So not only do most of his attacks send you flying backwards and away from him, he's got super armor and some unlucky strings of attacks that can take half the HP of the character you're controlling away. Although, for me in the final phase, I was very unlucky to get several instances where I got basically comboed to death. And so the last time I tried this fight for a guide, where I crashed out after dying and decided to give up on it, was when I managed to reach Deku's stage, and I got caught by a single projectile, which led me to losing all of my HP after several spams of those stupid sort of like ground tentacle things he does, the delayed ones that are on a timer, and the weird projectiles that he throws at you from when you're up in the air. So when it was all over and I wanted to give up, I double checked the timing of my recordings, and I shit you not, it took me from the beginning of that fight to where I died 20 minutes. 20 minutes on any final boss, let alone a fighting game boss with no checkpoints, is fucking stupid, and I'm pretty sure that alone should dock a couple points. The fact that every reviewer just conveniently ignores that and doesn't talk about it at all is just so sad, stupid, and pathetic, and severely unbalanced, especially for a final mission. It almost makes me wonder if the dev team members actually tried to beat that themselves, if they even tested that to think, you know what, maybe this is pretty fucking annoying, we better not do that. And so before I move on to the other game modes, I should bring up as well that none of the story missions, especially the ones with fighting in them, have a rank on them. So there's no 3 conditions that you have to meet by, say, beating the game above a certain HP threshold or beating it within a certain time limit. There's none of that anymore, and so you can't get S ranks, there's no bonus unlocks for that, and so there's no real reason to replay the story or any of the fights. There's no reason for it at all. So they completely killed the replayability factor for the story, and I only replayed it just simply for a guide, and that ended up being a giant waste of time. So anyway, the team-up missions might be the worst aspect of this game for me, because of the missed potential. I mentioned before that team-up missions were sort of like an open-world simulation within the grounds of UA, and it was a massive missed opportunity for you to actually be in a city with an open world where calls would go out for villain attacks or criminals, and you had to go and stop them with whatever character you wanted. Well, in this you're basically stuck playing as Deku, and essentially team-up missions are a simulation of whatever city that is, and the missions themselves are incredibly easy to beat. They're just very tedious, and in spite of being a simulation, it also uses itself as a way to retell the story from around Season 2 onwards, and they still feel the need to cut out certain fights and moments. So it's their lazy way, instead of just actually presenting us with cutscenes and a story and like a linear experience, it's their way of trying to shoehorn in previous missions that involve some sort of city or battle going forth. And within these missions are side objectives you can take in order to boost your overall score, but you only need to do a handful of them to be given an S rank. There's so many of them to do, but you don't need to do hardly any of them. Nothing of this really matters apart from the side objectives, because the side objectives do help you to unlock assist characters, and those assist characters can unlock diary missions, which are original content missions. Some of them are fighting, some of them are not, and I'll talk more about them in a second. But if you want to unlock actual battles and content for the characters in these other modes, you've got to stick with this mode and complete several side objectives. Movement around the space for these missions are usually super awkward with the different powers, like Deku with his black whip swinging around. You get caught on things all the time, or you end up banging into things, and you don't really feel like you can swing very far at all. If you want to get to the top of the buildings, or the higher ones, you can use Uraraka's gravity manipulation to float upwards, but because the movement is so janky and weird when you're running around or sprinting, if you're running towards an obstacle and you hold her quirk, or you hold the jump button for her quirk to have her float upwards, you get more distance and you get more height, but you're basically locked into that one direction. If you overshoot something, you can't just simply come back down, or you can't move off and change course. You've got to commit to where you're going, so it can lead you to overshoot buildings and completely missing objectives. The fact that you have to endure this kind of tedium for such a long time in order to unlock other content that's more true to the spirit of a fighting game, it's just unacceptable. And just for more references, and to figure out how far into the team missions I went, and to see how many of them there were, I went onto YouTube, and I looked up a YouTuber named Ben Gunn. I do recommend him, he makes a lot of great walkthroughs. No commentary, I don't think, but he covers basically every major game that comes out, and does a lot of work with them. Very good channel, very good work. So I looked at their walkthrough to see how far I got within the timestamps, and after clearing about 5 or 6 of these missions with about 2 to 3 hours of time, side objectives, doing the best I can and kind of rushing it a little bit, I saw that I only got up to about 1 hour and 10 minutes into his video that was 8.5 hours long. And I'm like, fuck that. I was not going to enjoy another 15 hours plus of this horseshit just to unlock a handful of fights and other modes that didn't unlock anything else of note except maybe like a couple of costumes or something. So amongst these side objectives, there are some good ones like the races through the checkpoints and navigating over the rooftops, and a couple of battles are really good. But you've got a lot of really shitty ones, like there's like a hide and seek mode, or you've got to run around looking for trading cards, or you've got to find other kids that are lost in alleyways or something and fight a couple dudes, and that's all over. Just really lame stuff, and they're all exactly the same, copy and pasted. There's a couple of different ones that are slightly unique on each mission, but there's like 10 plus on every single team up mission, and most of them are exactly the same. See, there's a series of side missions you can do as well. You can talk to a character, and they've got a list of different side missions. I did like half of them. There's a couple that are really fucking stupid, but I think the most egregious one is there's a side mission where you only get to take a single team with a couple of assist partners, and when you beat each wave of these enemies, you get a slight HP increase, but it's like 20%, it means like nothing. And so these waves last for 20 enemies, and so you need to fight against waves of 20 enemies, exactly the same in their waves with super armor, and different elements for different effects. And if you were somehow to accomplish this, then you would move on. And if you were somehow able to do all of this, to beat 100 enemies without failing, it would probably take you like an hour or a little bit longer than an hour to do this. But the fact that you can't get any upgrades, the fact that you can't change your character away from Deku to somebody else, or that your HP doesn't go up, or you don't get any of these extra boosts or modifiers to make it more fun, it just seems fucking pointless to do, and like a waste of time. Like, seriously, like 100 enemies, barely any healing, when the AI already have super armor and they're running away constantly spamming you with their quirks from a distance? What kind of nonsense is this? Alright, so we're going to quickly go over the archive battles. So from what I can tell, there aren't very many archive battles, maybe about 8 of them, but these are essentially quick fights from the story in the past events. Nothing's really special about them, except you usually fight solo against 3 enemies. The first 2 are available straight from the get-go, but the others are only unlocked by progressing further through the team-up missions with their side objectives, so obviously I valued my sanity and refused. But there's really nothing to them. There are a few different types of medals you can get: bronze, silver and gold, and if you want gold you have to win the fight in less than 1 minute. So when you have 3 enemies that fight you, when you're alone, they have super armor, they can react quickly with counters and dodges to all of your attacks, they have inflated HP and tend to run away, how are you expected to beat any of this in less than 1 minute? Fuck right off. And that's literally all there is to this mode. After beating it once, you can choose any characters to fight with, which is cool, but unfortunately it doesn't reward you, meaning you have to stoop down to the game's demands and stop having fun in order to do this. You have to use the original character that was used at the beginning of this mission in order to get records and ranks. You can't just use anybody you want. Because can you imagine, hypothetically, if the game allowed you to have fun by choosing the heroes or villains you wanted to experiment with their abilities in order to overcome this challenge? It's a crazy concept, I know. So in an even quicker fashion, diary missions are essentially just original content. So you complete side objectives within the team-up missions that relate to certain characters and recruiting them for assistance. Then throughout Class 1A, you could unlock original stories never seen before, but only exist within the game, so if you think you can find it anywhere else, you can't. And all of them that I did manage to get was super lame. So for Deku, it was just simply this. He's training, and then decides to train a couple of the other classmates that are interested in his form of training, and then Bakugo shows up, getting jealous, and wants to fight. And then he says some nasty things to Deku and says he'll catch up, and Deku says he'll surpass him, blah blah blah. Just fucking kill me already. And in Uraraku's mission, there was no combat at all. Literally no combat. No combat at all. Just you walking forward and following Aizawa around town and realizing he goes to an alleyway to visit a cat that he's befriended. Wow, just so fucking cool. Nothing about training or, her enhancing her quirk techniques or her hand-to-hand combat. No, it's just her walking around in a school uniform following Aizawa. How fucking riveting is that? And then lastly, which was the final nail in the coffin for me, if I needed another reason not to bother with the team-up missions, is in his last... Well, I don't know what you really call these, but... his last event, shall we say, he's supposed to go into one of these simulations, but he got a glitch in his simulation where a bunch of Nomus of different colours were spawning in, but they were either stationary or stuck doing looped animations. And I was obviously meant to find something. I didn't know what I was supposed to find, but I knew I had to find something. And so I was running around for about 20 minutes or so, trying to figure out what was wrong, until I eventually gave up and quit. And I pretty much just about threw my controller out the window when it turns out that the only way you could have completed that event is to willingly quit and back out, load the game back up, go to this event, and it'll have a cutscene beneath that, which explains or tries to explain what sort of glitch the simulation was going through. So it throws you into the simulation, not telling you that it's a mistake, not telling you that you need to quit. It just leaves you in there and just expects you to quit on your own, thinking that there's something worth finding in there, but there isn't. Even the extra content in this game that could have been potentially cool goes out of its way to make you feel empty. It just feels shallow and pointless. Why even include it if you're not going to do anything cool with it? I only briefly touched on the online mode, but I suspect the game will be dead within a few weeks as far as the online goes. That's how it usually is for these 3D anime fighters, especially when it comes to Bandai Namco. I'm sure it might be doing a little bit better on Xbox and PS5. Actually, no, I take that back. I'm pretty sure it's only doing a little bit better on PS5. And getting used to these changes compared to the old games is definitely rather tricky for me because I still have it hard-coded in my brain how to play Once Justice 2. But I was kind of enjoying myself for the brief time that I was playing it. It's just too bad that I wanted more substance from the single player. It's the main reason why I got the game in the first place. Ranked is more or less the same as the unranked match, except you're teamed up with people of a similar skill level, and the more you win, the more you progress through the ranks. I only got one rank up, I didn't play that mode all that much. There is a room function to create your own lobbies, but sadly if you try to find other lobbies, you need to know their exact name. So you can't locate other open lobbies by region or better connections to better match with people on your similar connections, which means this game's multiplayer only has longevity for people that know each other, and for the vast majority of the world, having a chance to find lobbies with good connections is now impossible. Because like it or not, most people that play games together don't know each other, and it would be more convenient if we just had rooms where people can set a region for where they are, and they're looking for people of a similar region to play in, and if you're near that region or you are in that region, then good, you've got yourself a game going. Many other fighting games have done this before, like well over a decade before, so the fact that this game doesn't do that is just kind of insulting. As far as the roster goes, I don't have too many complaints about the character roster. Some characters are missing from the previous game, but the roster is still a little bit bigger. I do think that the lack of moves and variety of combat options compared to the last game is definitely missed, but I suppose that's the price of having more characters. But they had 6 years to work on this game, and they copy and pasted most things, so I don't know why this is taking them so long, or why they chose to do that. It's just awfully disappointing. Obviously, I'm not a big fan about the idea of them cutting characters that should be in this game, like Stars and Stripes, and placing them in the Season Pass to tempt people into buying them. As if there's anyone going to be left to buy this shit when the multiplayer dies in a few weeks. And you don't even have an arcade mode to use the character in. You don't have an arcade mode in a fighting game. Especially since team-up missions are played almost exclusively by Deku, so that gets old pretty fucking fast and you can't even use any other character in there. Of all the new characters they brought into the roster, I did become a particularly big fan of Coda, Edgeshot, and Armored All Might. Coda's got some pretty dangerous ranged attacks actually, and he's actually really reliable. Edgeshot just feels good to play and dash around in. He's got some really good and consistent moves. Armored All Might is pretty fun with his animations, and he's got surprisingly good range on his grab attacks. So now we come to customization, because while I was never a huge fan of the customization in the previous game due to the ridiculousness of all the options you could do and how goofy your character could look, but at least it had it there. At least there was some degree of depth there, because you can customize all the stuff on your hands, your feet, your pants, your shirt, base costume, stuff that goes on your head. And while there's plenty of rewards you can get to afford lots of whatever you want to buy from the shop. It's the lack of variety that puts me off. Because now some of the outfits are completely cut from this game, and other pieces of your costume you can change are now gone, and so all that you're left with is only being able to customize your base costume. And even then, it's just the same costume with a palette swap, or it's a different costume, but it's got the same colors, or of course it's got all the other palette swap colors, so you can't really customize the colors, it's just all set in stone as the same. And I think this is probably the biggest slap in the face. Half of every character's costumes are now locked behind paywalls and DLC packs that you can purchase. It's insulting to have at least half, if not more, of the customization items all across the board in all categories locked behind a paywall, especially when the game already costs so much at its base price, with more tedious and shallow game modes compared to its original games. So microtransactions in this game can suck a fat dick. They're awfully and downright predatory. Never buy the season pass, never buy anything else, just the base game at a discount, stick to the story, and you're golden. Ultimately, why I speak so highly of Once Justice 2 is the variety. You can customize parts of every hero and villain costume with cross parts and strange hybrids, and I made some really awesome combos of looks. Not only that, but besides a story mode with ranking systems that added replayability, it also had a mission mode where you had to choose the path you went on before reaching the end, sort of like a roguelike. So you had to pick one fight over another, and each fight had unique modifiers with increasing difficulty, and there were dozens of these missions to spice things up. And you could use any character you wanted in any team, and if you ever ran low on HP, there were always ways that you could get it back, at the cost of potentially facing an even tougher fight afterwards. It had an arcade mode with 3 different routes of increasing difficulty for each character, and plenty of good character related rewards as well. There's just more to Once Justice 2, more substance, and it doesn't waste your time before getting to the good content. Almost everything is exclusively unlocked from the very beginning, and you can take off doing whatever you want. So, to conclude this review, I have to mention that this entire review was written up across the course of a few days, and it took me a couple days even longer to actually get around to doing the commentary for this. So it's hard to review a game for me, especially when I do it extensively, when I don't really like it, and I'm sure there's tons of shit I missed, but I pretty much summed up most of the basic things. There are some cool changes and additions to the combat. The core gameplay is fine, but it's the lack of good content and direction for that gameplay that snuffs out any enjoyment. Same with the story. I had quite a bit of fun in the story despite some missions that I felt were pretty important that were missing, and a chance to have unique missions and a ranking system, and of course, some really great fights still exist in this game. Bakugo versus a young one-for-all near the end of the game being my biggest highlight. That was a really great fight. But unlike with Code Vein 2, which I reviewed earlier, this is kind of worse than a game with great ideas and terrible executions like that one was, or just inventing new ways to get in the way of the fun, but this game actively sabotages any chance for the hope of a better game by making the actual content itself stale, undesirable, and nobody is willing to endure everything and play through it all. Almost nobody is going to want to do that. It's pretty much already over from the very beginning, rotten to the core. After 6 long years of waiting, I couldn't help but feel like this was all for nothing. My Hero Academia, All's Justice, is bad. Alright, look, I'm sorry for another bummer review, especially just a week after the last one, but I really do have to be honest, and you can't make any exceptions anymore. You have to give people the down low. You have to tell people what they're going to be missing out on, or what they're not going to be missing out on. You have to inform people of what they're going to be in for. I've been very tired for the last couple of days, not only because this review took a while for me to bother writing and talking about, I just wanted it finished, because I plan on returning to Tekken 8 again soon, and I haven't touched the game since the early days of Season 2, and I'm quite keen to start maining Lars as well as doing reviews for the new characters. Maybe even doing like a weekly sort of music video where I show gameplay of me playing the game and slowly rising up through the ranks again. The last time I played properly, I managed to get, I think it might have been like Flame Ruler, like halfway through the purples. I want to see if I can get into the blues this time. And if you are curious about the walkthroughs and guides I've been making over on my other channel, they're on the other channel called Snarist. There should be a link in the description of my channel. Not too many videos use the name Snarist, so I'm pretty sure you're able to find it easily when you put it in. But anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully the next game I review will be better for my sanity. I do have my eyes on Romeo is a Dead Man by Suda51. You know, they made like Lollipop Chainsaw and some pretty weird hack and slash games. I have a feeling this game isn't going to be super great, but because it's pretty niche already, I sort of want to take my time with it and maybe get around to reviewing it when I've got a quiet moment in the year. And they're re-releasing East 10 Nordics, but it's East 10 Proud Nordics. It's like a definitive re-release. It makes me a little bit worried, wondering why they needed to re-release it. But I played East 9 Monster Nox back in 2023 and I loved it. So I think this game will be great. I just need a bit of time to settle down with it, maybe later on in the year as well. But otherwise, the next game coming out near the end of February is one that I probably will get, even though I'm not a huge fan of them. Resident Evil 9 Requiem will be coming out. Not a big fan of the Resident Evil games, never have been, but I'm genuinely curious about it, and I think it'll be good content for the channel at least, even if I'm not going to be like the greatest at playing it. I still want to see if I can do, like professional runs or whatever. Like, I want to get good at the game, and I want to be able to match other people, and I want to be able to help other people as well if I can manage it. Anyway, it's enough rambling from me. I'll see you guys later.